So every module I get to look at a lot of projects. This week, 70 projects, and then an associated maybe 30 or 40 in-class projects that have been submitted. And a couple of things always stick out that I want to kind of, have you pay particular attention to. And I'll sometimes, mention them in the comments, but in general, I like to try and take some notes and then kind of represent these concepts. So one of the first ones that's always on my mind is the idea that we're always looking at our model, and we do a lot of examining that model and kind of like rotating it around axis, and we kind of distort it in order to get to areas where we want to examine and change things. And many times we will just kind of accept that view as being how we're going to output it. And I want to caution you on that. If you look at any professional publications, even websites of architects, and you see the way they present their architecture, you'll notice that the vertical lines of the building are always vertical. They don't have any kind of perspective distortion on them. The easy way to make sure that that always happens is to make sure that your eye elevation and your target elevation are matching each other. And you might say, well, sometimes I can't get everything I need to in the view. If I'm using those two same elevations, the top of my building is cut off. But that's easily corrected by opening up the crop region. So and generally, in almost all cases, you can get the full view of the building in and keep the lines vertical, especially paying attention once again to that idea of eye elevation and target elevation being the same, meaning the camera's looking straight ahead. And I think that'll, in general, help you a lot when you're making large layouts of presentation boards, because this idea of this distortion of the building, once it's laid out with other views of the building, can become really kind of chaotic in the layout. So just ask you to pay a little more attention to that. And one of the other reasons for this idea of these vertical lines is really to capture how our architecture feels kind of at grade. So this is a really good example in our mass exploration of being down at street level and then looking up at our building. Notice the lines are still vertical, so the camera is looking straight ahead. So all of this perspective is giving us the impact that this building is tall, large, and massive. And so it's a really strong way to convey it. And you can imagine when we were looking at it in 3D models, so many times it just looked like it was just a little block sitting on a table. So one of the other reasons why we want to keep that idea of eye and target elevation equal. Some of you had some problems with the mass exploration project or in-class project, and I can really understand why. A lot of it had to do with the shortcomings of the way I've created some of the video instruction for that. One of the biggest problems was that you would place a wall and it would tell you that a wall already exists there. And one of the reasons for that problem was the generic mass that you created was already overlapping a wall that you created. It was very hard to visualize whether walls were actually being, in fact, placed there until you had hid the constructing mass element. So I really apologize for that kind of confusion. And for the most part, students that attempted did a really good job with it. Another problem we're really having a lot of difficulty with is our images disappearing inside of Revit during realistic rendering. And this is hyperlinked to some people that are making suggestions to it, but there are really no clear fixes for this. It seems to be, I see if you were to actually click out to this link, you can scroll down and you'll actually find where people are talking about having rooms of 30 computers and being kind of hit and miss also. I don't know if I can find that one. Similar, all kinds of similar issues that they're discussing with that. And I'm not seeing that one that I just mentioned, so I don't want to take too much time discussing or looking through this. Let me just see. But anyway, in the long run on this is that we're not going to solve this problem completely. I've got a few of the suggestions that I have for it, are to open the file from inside of Revit. Some people have tried that and found it successful. Some people haven't. Many times, if it isn't successful, then it means that Revit's already created some kind of an error or problem, and it's just not warning you about it. So if you quit out of Revit, you'll usually see a fatal error kind of dialog box pop up, and you can restart Revit. And then you can try it on a lab computer. If you can't resolve the problem, and you're still always free to discuss it with me, you can also submit your projects in consistent colors. I won't downgrade anyone who isn't able to do realistic rendering inside of the software, although it really is a big disappointment that it's not working for everyone. So maybe I'll keep, working on this issue, and hopefully we'll see some resolution to it before the end of the semester. Another thing that came up this year, it hasn't come up before, and really kind of surprised me. A lot of people had a preference for doing two-dimensional drafting, looking at creating walls, and I've kind of illustrated it here in the plan view, thinking that, really saying that that was a lot easier for them to do accurate, clean work. And I spent a lot of time in the instructional videos doing our modeling in three-dimensional way. And I hope we'll be able to have a discussion for when we're live with this lecture about what our preferences are and how maybe I could modify the videos to kind of capture both techniques, maybe better. The real reason, the pedagogical reason, the learning reason that I want to do modeling in 3D is that you get an immediate feedback of what you're constructing. It's no longer abstracted. You actually see the window when it's being built. And I got really quite excited about that when I saw how good Revit was at working in that three-dimensional mode. But I can understand how working in the 2D mode can also be as effective, if not more. So I'd like to have a little discussion about that, find out where we're at. I also got an interesting comment this last module, a student saying, I don't understand how this is teaching us anything. I'm going to start a project and not have a single clue on how to do any of this because I'm just following the videos. And I think that that's a valid kind of point. The feeling that he's not actually doing anything himself. It's mindless work, not making any connections for him or her. I don't want to identify a student. I don't want to make anyone feel embarrassed about it or uncomfortable. And but I think it really is important that we have a kind of class discussion about this, find out really how we feel about learning with video. If there are new ways that we could start to think about learning, I'm really happy and open for invitations and ways to shift the dialogue, the learning methodology. I get the feeling that a lot of students are satisfied and feel like they're learning with video, but I'd really like to hear the voices of people who might be more dissatisfied or could offer some kind of ideas with it. So I hope we'll be able to discuss that together. I'm going to stop this video now, and when we come back, I'll start the next segment of the lecture.